What's up, guys and girls? It's Vision, and today I'm going over all of the campaign and progression skips currently in Last Epoch. I'm going to go over the dungeon skips, how each dungeon can move you through the campaign, and at the end of that, I'm going to discuss whether that's a good idea or not, and what kind of benefits or trade-offs that could offer you. And then after that, I'm going to talk about in-game skips, how to use Glyph of Envy and the new corruption catch-up mechanics added to the game. So let's start with the dungeons, and how the dungeons work, how the dungeons are considered campaign skips, and whether or not you should do them. To begin doing the dungeon skips, this is more of a thing for an alternate character because you're not going to be finding many, if any, dungeon keys during the campaign. They're kind of rare, but once you start getting into Monolith, you start finding those a bit more often, and so this is going to be something that you're looking at more on an alternate character. The first one you find when you enter the campaign is the Lightless Arbor, and it's right here in Ruined Era. As soon as you leave the council chambers for the first time, you just progress a couple of zones, and you'll find a little offshoot path that takes you up here to the Shrouded Ridge, and then also then to the Lightless Arbor. So when you get to this zone, it'll look like this, the Lightless Arbor here, and you walk in, and there's a door for you to place your key in. And you'll see that the Lightless Arbor, the very first tier, this is what you'll have access to originally, is level 20. So I'm not going to go into all of the dungeon mechanics and how to complete the dungeon because I want to try to keep this video as short as possible, and the dungeon mechanics are probably better for another video, or Maxroll has very good written guides on these that I can link down in the description. But most importantly here, Lightless Arbor, Tier 1, level 20. So you do this dungeon, you complete the dungeon, you beat the boss, and it spits you out here at the end at the Corrupted Lake, where you'll find a little path that ends up taking you instead to the Imperial Era. Right here at the Risen Lake is where it spits you out. And so essentially what this dungeon is skipping is the whole cultist camp, the Wellrun docks, doing this area up here with the soul vessels, the whole temple series up here, and then the initial part of the Imperial Era. And so you end up here at the Risen Lake. So that is the first dungeon, that is the Lightless Arbor. The next dungeon that you encounter is actually nearby where Lightless Arbor spits you out. So that's going to be in the Imperial Era. Right here above the Risen Lake is the Soulfire Bastion. So you can see these kind of flow into each other, but let's go to the Soulfire Bastion and take a look. Alright, so you navigate up to the Soulfire Bastion, and you'll find the Soulfire Bastion door, and you plug your key in. You'll see that Soulfire Bastion is, the Tier 1 is level 45, so obviously there's a big jump in levels here. You go from the level 20 Lightless Arbor zone up to this level 45 area, Soulfire Bastion. But you do Soulfire Bastion, you go through, you fight the boss, and basically where this is going to spit you out then is the Divine Era here, and it's right next to where the arenas are located in the target dummies, the testing dummies. So this area here in Divine Era. So you're moving through the timelines and skipping big chunks of the campaign. So by doing Soulfire Bastion, you're skipping all of this path over to the Dreadnought spitting you out down here on the Shining Cove. So you're missing this whole path through the desert, the different sigils, all these side quests here. You're missing Oracle's Abode, the way station, this whole path up the mountain here. So this is a pretty big skip. You're skipping out on Yulia's Haven, the fight with Zarek and Harton up here at the Immortal Summit. You're going down from the Gates of Solarum to Heoboria, and then the path out of Heoboria to the Wingari Fortress. So that's a pretty substantial skip of campaign material, but you do get access, quick access to the arenas here. Alright, so next let's take a look at Temporal Sanctum. Temporal Sanctum you access in the Imperial Era. It's right here next to the Shining Cove, this little time rift. This time rift will take you to a side area in the Ruined Era, basically, and you're running through here, and that's where Temporal Sanctum is. So you do Temporal Sanctum, and it's going to spit you out Divine Era, basically right here in the Radiant Dunes. And the good part about this is the side quest that you need to do to get into Majelka is right near where this dungeon spits you out. So this dungeon's really useful for if you have all of your passives and idols collected by the time you get to this area of the campaign, so way before here, you can use Temporal Sanctum to kind of like skip ahead and get to the section where you're where you get to pick your item faction without doing all of Chapter 8, all of the lead up through Chapter 9. So this one is the most commonly used of all of the dungeon skips. because a lot of people will have all their passives and idols collected by the time they finish Chapter 7, and then instead of running through all of Chapter 8 and the beginning of Chapter 9, you can just do Temporal Sanctum, and it spits you out, and you can just quickly do this little side quest with Zarek down here and unlock your factions then. So this dungeon is... the very first tier of this, when you get here, is level 55. This is what you'll have access to on your character at the very beginning. So tier 1 is level 55. That's where you're starting. So those are the dungeon skips. That's how you skip big sections of the campaign and kind of like what each dungeon skip is used for or what you could use it for. I'm going to talk a little bit about why or if you should use these or if you'd want to use these at all. This is subject to change because... EHG could always adjust the levels or the difficulty of some of this stuff, but currently, these are my thoughts on it. Let's start with Lightless Arbor. So, Lightless Arbor, it's pretty much understood that you're going to be doing this on alternate characters because you're not going to have immediate access to these keys on a fresh character of a cycle, so we're going to assume that this is on an alternate character. So, on an alternate character, you're running through campaign, you get to this area at about level 15-ish, level 15. So, by the time you get to this point, you're going to be a little bit under-leveled than Lightless Arbor's level 20. But that's okay, right? Because you're going to have some uniques and probably maybe different legendaries that you're using to help level your character up. But what I found in testing this is the dungeon itself and the boss takes a little more effort than just throwing on some good leveling uniques, like... if you just throw on a couple arboreal circuits for the armor and move speed and you've got a Firestarter's torch, you're still going to struggle a little bit with this boss. So it's going to take actual, like, good legendaries that you've made specifically for making campaign easy. So it's a little bit of effort to set this up and do this. And what I found in testing is you only save about 5 minutes, give or take some. So I ran through this pretty casually without rushing, and it took me about 20 minutes to reach from this point to where you would get spit out in the Risen Lake here. And so really for the effort that you're putting in to clear the Lightless Arbor, you're not saving a huge amount of time. And in addition to this, you're missing some passives and idle quests on the way, which you'll have to account for at some other point during leveling. So you miss the Lost Refuge up here, which gives 2 passive points. And you miss the dragon quest here in the ancient era where you take the time portal and go kill the dragon. You lose idle slots here, and you don't really get a big time advantage for doing this. So in my personal opinion, I don't think it's quite worth it to do the dungeon. It's just if you're just trying to level and not doing anything specific. And I think essentially what this is going to come down to for all of the dungeons except for Temporal Sanctum, which I'll go into a bit more. The Lightless Arbor and Soulfire Bastion skips are more for players that know why they want to do that. This is for somebody that's going to be doing this for a very specific reason, not just for the fun of it. I mean, you could do it if you want to just like shake things up and explore a bit and see the campaign in like a different order, but the people that are actually going to be using these skips are most likely like speedrunners that have a predetermined strategy in mind and why they're doing this. So that being said, let's talk a little bit more about the Soulfire Bastion skip. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Soulfire Bastion is a whole 20 levels above the Lightless Arbor. So if you're doing a skip to a skip, you pop out of Lightless Arbor around level 20, and then there's a big 20 level jump here to go into Soulfire Bastion. So this is, Lightless Arbor is pretty difficult. Soulfire Bastion is going to be even more difficult. So it's very likely for your character that the struggle that you're going to have doing this is not worth the time invested, and you'd be way better off just finishing the campaign, collecting the idols that way as you go. That's why I kind of say that this is more for speedrunners that have a specific reason why they're doing this. But one of the upsides of the Soulfire Bastion skip, as I kind of showed earlier, you skip a big section of the campaign. So you skip like most of the Imperial era in the beginning of the Divine era. And you get a nice little shortcut here to the arenas and the training dummies, which normally if you're going through the campaign as intended is kind of out of the way. So you kind of get like a little shortcut there to unlock this stuff. So that is the Soulfire Bastion skip. So finally, Temporal Sanctum. This one's the most common, and this is the one that I use personally on every character. When I do campaign, I have all my idols and passives by the time I finish Chapter 7, and so I don't want to go through all of Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 to get to picking my item faction, and so Temporal Sanctum is pretty easy for a character that has gotten to that point of the campaign. All passives and idols, she'll be about level 45-ish, and so you can do Temporal Sanctum, and it spits you out here in Divine Era, and like I said, there's a little side quest here with Zarek, and pretty much you just go straight from that all the way up to the city, and then your item faction's there. So of the 3 dungeons, I personally think that the Temporal Sanctum is the most useful one, and the other 2 I don't really mess with too much because I'm not a speedrunner. But speaking of speedrunner, somebody that kind of helped me a bit come to some of these conclusions and look through the different dungeon skips and what their uses are is Tarek. He's our leveling specialist at Maxroll, and I'm going to link his YouTube channel down in the description. He pretty much only speedruns. He speedruns a lot, and so sometimes when I'm leveling, what I like to do is have one of his videos going on the other monitor and just trying to follow along and optimize my routes. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I definitely recommend checking out his channel. And then just also I wanted to shout out him for helping me with this. So that's all for the dungeon skips. Now let's go into the endgame skips, the endgame progression skips. So there are 2 endgame skips that I'm going to be going over for this section of the video. The Glyph of Envy and the Corruption Catch-Up mechanic that just got added this patch in 1.1.3. So let's start with we're going to start with the Glyph of Envy. The Glyph of Envy, I have a full video over on the different uses and why you would want to use this. So if you want to check that out, I'm going to link that down in the description too, and I'll have a little link for it up here. But essentially what Glyph of Envy does is you can modify an item, and it changes all of your stats wildly, except for the one that you use the glyph on, and you'll see that it siphons stability to the last echo that you completed. So say you get a character to endgame for the first time, and you do 1 echo and Fall of the Outcast, and you use a Glyph of Envy, and it's going to fill your stability bar up completely, immediately, and so that way you can challenge the boss, defeat it, and then move on to the next timeline quickly. And then outside of normal timelines, empowered timelines, it does also fill a portion of your bar, not the full bar the way that it does in normal timelines, but in empowered it fills around 200 stability. And so multiple Glyph of Envies on an empowered timeline can fill this bar and make it so you encounter the boss after 4 or 5 Glyph of Envies or so. So this is also used to farm bosses, which I kind of go over in the Glyph of Envy video, but also it's a good way to just complete a timeline quickly, faster than you would normally if you're pushing out a full echo web. That's how Glyph of Envy works as a progression skip. And so in addition to Glyph of Envy, one of the new features that just got added was the Corruption Catch-Up mechanic. Basically how this works, and I think this is the most impactful of all of the skips in terms of raw time saved. The new Corruption Catch-Up mechanic works like this. You get a character to endgame, you push your very first empowered timeline to 300 corruption, and then every fresh timeline, so let's find an example here. Let's say that I came to Fall of the Outcasts. I pushed only this timeline to 300 corruption and empowered. When I start a new timeline then, when I complete my very first echo in that timeline, it creates a little shade node in the web that immediately gives you 296 corruption. So basically, once you have pushed one timeline to 300, you can get all of the timelines to around, you can get them to 296 with just one shade. And this saves hours. This saves full hours of just pushing out webs again and again and again and again and raising up your corruption in these different areas. So out of all of the skips and campaign skips and progression skips in this video, this saves the most time, and this is something that just got added to the game and is definitely worth taking advantage of. Remember to keep your empowered timelines fresh and just push one up first. That way you can take advantage of the shade creation. So that being said, the corruption catch-up mechanic's really nice. My opinion on Glyph of Envy. Personally, I like to kind of level my character up organically, so I found on this alt character that I made, I had a lot more, it was way smoother to just go through these naturally. It doesn't take a lot of stability to fill up these normal timelines, so, you know, like 10 echoes or so, and you're ready to fight the boss, do the quest line, fight the boss. It's not that big of a deal, and you're leveling up smoothly, getting some like introductory drops. You're not going to be all the way up here at level 50 getting drops that are for like a level 80 to wear, for example, and then you just have an inventory full of gear that you can't wear. I personally feel like it's just a lot smoother to progress through these naturally. And the good news with that is, once you've been to Empowered on your first character, and you've defeated the first Harbinger for the first time, your second character gets to go to Empowered after one level 90 timeline instead of all three. If I were going to use Glyph of Envy to skip myself into Empowered quickly, it would be on these 3 level 90 timelines anyway. these last 2 to get to Empowered. But now on an alt character, you don't have to do that anyway, so I don't feel like it's that big of a deal. Like, you save a lot of time now by not needing to do all 3 on an alt character. So yeah, that's that. That's my thoughts on the in-game progression skips, the Glyph of Envy, and the corruption catch-up mechanic. So we went over all of the different dungeon skips, when, how, why you might use those, Glyph of Envy and the corruption catch-up mechanic for in-game skips. So hopefully this helps, hopefully this gives you an idea. I expect 11th Hour Games is going to add more stuff like this into the game, but so far this is what we have, and when new stuff gets added, I'll go over those too. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments, or if there's anything else you'd like to see me cover in one of these videos, feel free to let me know that also. And I'd be happy to try to get around to that as soon as possible. Anyway, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you all again soon. Peace.